And so the purpose of this presentation is to distill basically the things that I saw most tightly correlate to actual eventual success in landing a tech internship. And since this audience is primarily a middle school and high school audience, or perhaps maybe entirely a high school audience, I'm going to focus on the internship side, because basically what happens is when you go to college and you have that first summer, that second summer, landing an internship or not can kind of give you a really big leg up and make a difference then as to what your end result looks like in terms of full-time job opportunities. In particular, because some companies do a lot of their full-time recruiting only by offering full-time offers to the folks who've interned for them before. And so for some companies, if you dream of working, at a Facebook or a Twitch or a Microsoft, you might actually really have a huge leg up if you're internship ready. So I'm going to focus more narrowly on like, what can you do between now and starting college and in your freshman year of college to maximize your chances of landing a tech internship. And to tell you first how the deck can be stacked against you, and why this presentation I think has some useful tricks that can reverse the odds and put them in your favor. A lot of companies are really averse to giving internships to freshmen in college, and that's just the truth. The fundamental reason behind that is that across the United States, it's very uncommon for freshmen who are majoring in computer science to have actually coded before. So you all are coming in with some amount of coding experience. Even the most beginner person on this Zoom chat, like you're at a hackathon. And that gives you a leg up compared to the national average of folks who want to major in computer science. Most folks in the country will not have had access to a single hackathon, single CS course, but they're still going to be in a college saying, I'm majoring in computer science. So what that means is companies are going to go and say, well, freshmen, really hard to tell who is or isn't qualified, because you have this pool of folks like you all who may have gotten an early start, who may actually be productive as interns, and you have a pool of folks who may not have even taken their first computer science course yet. Remember that a lot of traditional colleges, you get your general education requirements out of the way, and computer science is one of the most in-demand classes. So getting into an intro CS in many cases waits until your sophomore year. So imagine that from the perspective of a company. You have a freshman CS major who maybe has not even taken a single CS course yet. Your job, through following the advice of this presentation, is going to be in every single way possible to not pattern match as that freshman who maybe has never taken a computer science class before, and instead to pattern match against somebody who's an obvious profile of someone they want to interview for an internship. More specifically, this presentation is going to be about getting that foot in the door. So it's not a presentation about like how to crush the interview. It's a presentation about getting the interview in the first place. And so I hope that these tips are useful to you as you kind of consider your strategy of how you build up your own profile and your own presence on the internet to really get yourself to be in a position where you're competitive for these internships. So what do you think it takes to land an internship or career in tech? I'd love to get just some chatter in the chat. Like if you had to distill it down to 1 or 2 points, what do you think it is? Give it a minute or two for folks to do that. Agnes messaged me saying experience. That's right. So like relevant experience, being able to point to another internship, which can become a chicken and egg problem, right? Like how do you get an internship if you need an internship to get an internship? Motivation is another one I'm seeing in the chat. Passion. These are all good things. Wait for one more. Good work ethic. These are all correct, but the thing is they are necessary but not sufficient. Unfortunately, when you have this really, really big bias against hiring freshmen at play, part of the story is also packaging. So it's what you do and prioritize between now and when you're applying, and how you take all those things that you do and you package them to pattern match as somebody who's super hireable. So the inspiration behind this talk actually comes from a very specific story. In 2012, in the very first summer programming school ever ran, we had a student named Katie Siegel. Katie had just graduated Harker High School and was on her way to become a freshman at MIT. And Katie made a mobile game over the summer at Make School, launched it to the App Store, had an App Store link and everything, hey, download my app on the App Store. Went to MIT freshman year and then snuck into an upperclassman career fair. When she went around to various tables, it was very clear that they would, if you gave a resume that said that you were a freshman, then they would just toss it in the bin, even at MIT. And so what she did is that she came deliberately resume-less. No resumes, no paper resume. Instead, she would go up to various tables and say, hey, are you hiring mobile developers? And if they said yes, she would say, hey, you want to check out my app that I made? All of a sudden, she has them playing her app. Then, rather than look at a resume, she's like, listen, are you interviewing? Would love to schedule an interview. And all of a sudden, she's completely short-circuited the process. They're not reviewing a resume anymore. There's this person in front of them who has launched an app to the App Store, and they're hiring mobile development interns. So they exchange emails. They start an email conversation about scheduling an interview. By the time they realized that she was a freshman, it was too late. It was too late because they had already gotten through that first step. They had scheduled an interview. She had passed the first interview, and she ended up interning at Square that summer, which back then was a much earlier stage company. Now very well established in the payments world. And so that experience is what gave me the inspiration for this talk. Is realizing that you can actually totally disrupt the hiring process in your favor. Right? She played them. And basically she stood out from all of her peers. Now, I'm going to get into a bunch of tactical things in this presentation. I want to take a second to talk about a communication thing. One of the important aspects to Katie's story is that she talked to every recruiter at that fair like a peer. So every other student, not every other student, but a lot of other students have this subordinate mindset. They think, I'm a student, these people are recruiters, right? In the same way that sometimes when I do these talks, a student will, instead of saying, hey, Jeremy, they'll say, Professor Rossman or something. Like I'm like, so in some different category of human, which by the way, I never even graduated college, so you can't call me professor. And she used peer language and peer sort of connection. So what does that mean? The way that you talk to someone, if you think that they're a peer, is one where you're not asking for their recognition or approval. You're not like, oh, wouldst thou consider hiring me, humble freshman? Here's a resume. Okay, I'm going to walk out now. No, you go and you do what peer adults do. You say, hey, how are you liking Boston so far? Right? People who don't want something from each other and engage as peers often ask the other person about themselves in a way that is genuinely interested. And guess what? Most of you are already at the age where the way that you talk and the way that you engage will be a stronger cue as to how old you are than the way that you look, especially now that we're all online. And so what that means is you actually have an opportunity to completely allow someone to forget or not even notice that you may be in a time in your educational career that doesn't match where they're typically used to hiring. Because it's so rare for somebody to engage at a peer level, to just be like, hey, like, how's online recruiting treating you? Imagine you're at an online career fair, right? And you make small talk. You ask them genuine questions about how interested, as if you're interested in them. And here's a really important trick there. In conversations, if someone else does more of the talking, typically they remember it as a better conversation. It's weird. It's a paradox. If you ask someone a bunch of questions about themselves and they tell you a bunch about themselves, and then afterwards you're like, all right, sweet, well, here's my email. Let's, I'm shooting you an email right now. Would love to schedule an interview. The fact that they did all the talking and they didn't ask you about a bunch of things that you rationally should think, well, this is a conversation where they should be grilling me about my experience and all that. But oddly, that one time where there was a person that they said, yeah, it's my first time in Boston. The MIT Career Fair is cool. Campus is awesome. You say, oh yeah, do you need any recommendations for food? I can recommend you a few awesome spots to go to afterwards. Maybe you even ask them to hang out afterwards. Maybe they're bored. And doing that, which is totally like non-professional, somehow people remember that as a more positive interaction than the one where they grilled you and you told them a bunch of facts about yourself. And I think the reason for that in this context in particular is that part of what they're judging for is a fit from a maturity and communication perspective. And if you are that one person who communicates with an adult as a peer, not not calling them Mr. or Mrs., but saying, hey, John, hey, Samantha, what do you think about this and that? Then you're going to get through to them at a level that already lets them imagine you as a peer employee versus as somebody who's in the pool of contenders who's like, vying for their attention. And that psychological switch, I think, is really important. And some of the strategies here are also just about ruling out ways of people to think of you as part of that amorphous crowd of folks all trying to vie for approval. So tip number one is professional communication, but in a way that is not the way you think. Professional communication in tech today is actual casual communication. Maybe in finance and banking, it's different, but in tech, it's first name basis, it's casual conversation, it's genuine interest in the other person, it's not calling someone Mr. or Professor, it's using informal language in emails, and it's talking to folks as peers. And that somehow triggers a sense of they can already picture you as a peer at their organization. So now thinking about all the different careers you could go into. There's the obvious stuff that different types of developers, data scientists, mobile, this and that. But remember that this advice could also apply to internships that are tech adjacent. So that's both roles at tech companies that are not tech roles, people operations, which is like company culture and events, corporate social responsibility, which is the arm of companies that try to give back to the community. For example, a lot of funding for hackathons comes out of the corporate social responsibility budget. So being somebody who works for a company to support the hackathon scene could be a semi-technical job. Folks working in marketing or even working in tech adjacent. So a lot of finance jobs these days actually are coding jobs. Even if they're not in a strictly tech company, you could have both a non-coding, non-tech job at a tech company or a tech job, coding job at a non-tech company. And all this is possible. This advice generally applies with the one caveat that norms around formality are particularly different in the world of finance and consulting. But what I'm going to tell you applies for basically the rest of tech, whether you're talking to a NASA recruiter or a Tesla recruiter or a Google recruiter or some small startup, everything I'm telling you basically applies. Goldman Sachs, Boston Consulting Group, they're trying to get more casual and cool, but maybe there a little bit more formality is useful. And frankly, I have less experience with those worlds. So in terms of getting there, you want to make sure that as you source opportunities, you look at the intersection between passion, role, and personal growth. And to do this effectively, you can't just limit yourself to the tip of the tech iceberg. You can't just be like, I'm going to apply to Facebook, Apple, Google, or I have a dream. I've always wanted to work in Disney Imagineering, so I'm going to apply only to Disney. That's kind of like, applying only to Harvard and MIT and having no safety schools. It's kind of like, hypothetically, if there was an app where you could swipe right on people you wanted to talk to and swipe left on people who didn't, it's kind of like swiping right 3 times and then closing it, reopening it later, seeing that you have no matches and concluding you're going to die single, right? That just doesn't make any sense. So in trying to find something at the intersection of passion, personal growth, and a role, you need to also make sure that you have access to numbers. And what a lot of folks don't realize is there's thousands of tech companies out there, which means that by a factor of 1,000, the ones that you've heard of are outnumbered by the ones you haven't. And any vertical that you can think of, there's a tech company there. In fact, there's almost certainly an investor who invests only in those companies. So that's my greatest trick for finding a list of companies to apply to as a student. Find investors who invest only in that sector. Do you think crypto is cool? Google crypto venture capitalists. Find the top ones. On their websites, they will often list what's called their portfolio. You click the portfolio button and you get a list of all the companies they've invested in. Bingo. You have a list of 10, 20, 30, 50 companies all in crypto. You think medicine is interesting? Search medicine venture capitalists or health venture capitalists. You'll find VCs who specialize in that area. And then you'll find their portfolio pages. Boom, 50 companies specializing in health tech. You care about education? You can look at some of the folks who invested in Make School. Learn Capital. Can you guess what they invest in? They invest in education. Their portfolio page, bingo, 100+ companies that are all education based, and so on and so forth. You are not going to be able to find this intersection if you limit yourself to the big names you've already heard of. And actually, part of landing an opportunity is a volume play. It is finding a large set of opportunities that, sorry to trigger to use some terminology that may be traumatic to the seniors in the room, but you need to have your reach companies, your target companies, and your safety companies, including at the safety level, probably some roles that are not strictly your top choice. Maybe it's a customer support internship where you still work with clients who need help integrating the software technically. So you might do a little bit of code debugging as part of your customer support, but it's not a software engineering job. But as part of a portfolio of jobs you're applying to, you need to have that in there as a safety option, a target option, and a reach option. One of the biggest distinguishing factors between people who get internships and don't is people who run a good process versus those who don't. So George was messaging me saying good work ethic is super important, but knowing how to apply that work ethic effectively is super important too. What I mean by a good process is having the discipline to actually assemble a list of companies that you want to apply to. Not something that's random based on what you've heard of or who you ran into at a career fair, but actually putting in an hour to do some research and making a spreadsheet of these companies and saying, okay, now from 4 to 8 p.m., this Monday, I'm going to crank down this list and I'm going to apply and apply and apply and apply and apply. The other thing that is going to be important in terms of taking this piece of advice, passion fit, personal growth fit, and role fit, and turning it into something actionable, is that companies like to hear that they are at your intersection of passion, growth, and role. And they like to hear that in ways that they don't often make formal space for you to express. The formal way to go about things is, of course, to apply to a job through the form that they put on their website. But what we recommend our students to do is to go on LinkedIn and find somebody who's on the team you want to work on, or if it's a small enough company, even the founder, or maybe even a manager of the team or a recruiter at the company, and send a message, offer to connect, and then have an actual one-to-one conversation. If you can't get connected to them on LinkedIn, try emailing them. And people go, oh, but I don't know their email. Sure. Well, my name is Jeremy Rossman. Can folks in the chat guess what my email could possibly be? And my company is called Make School. What could my email possibly be? Someone try to guess my email. Come on, don't be shy. Can no one guess my email? Jeremy Rossman at makeschool.com. That's a good guess. Sorry, someone was going to say something else.
Yeah. I was going to say Jeremy at makeschool.com.
Yeah. So my email is actually Jeremy at makeschool.com. And guess what? If you tried Jeremy Rossman at makeschool.com and it was wrong, it will bounce. So I'll never know that you tried something and got it wrong, right? So if you wanted to reach me, you could try Jeremy Rossman at makeschool.com. It would bounce. You could try Jeremy.Rossman at makeschool.com. It would bounce. And then you try Arnav's suggestion, Jeremy at makeschool.com. It would not bounce. You'd be like, aha, I got it. And I would never know that you tried 3 emails that didn't work, right? So you can reach out to somebody, and this is actually highly correlated to success. A short 1 to 2 line email saying, hey, I just applied for a role at your company, and I just wanted to let you know that this role is aligned with my passions, and I'm really excited about what you do at insert X company. You give them a quick one-liner about why it's exciting, quickly customized, and then you move on. Because it's a volume strategy, remember, you're not going to do this at one company. You're going to do this at 30 companies, because you're going to go through and find a list of all the companies you're interested in. You're going to go ahead and try to make sure you make personal contact for every single one of them in some way, LinkedIn or email, by guessing emails, and you will increase your hit rate tremendously. Again, most people don't do that. Most people have fixed mindset. Most people's brains were poisoned by the college application process, where there's nothing you can do to get in. And if you do try something creative, you're probably going to make the news because it was illegal. Those college scandals we all heard about, right? So you've been conditioned that getting in somewhere is like you have to somehow be worthy and qualify and do all these things to document your amazingness, and then put them all in the right places in the right form. And then it's mysterious. And then like somebody at Harvard decides whether you get blessed with the opportunity to go there. Hiring is not like that. It's a bunch of folks who are barely older than you are. Oftentimes recruiters are just out of college, trying to decide who to interview based on criteria that are not always super objective, and everything is gameable. You can get in touch with people, you can chat with them. And because so many freshmen in college or even high school students never do this, the ones that do instantly pattern match as being somebody who's way more in the loop. Because you know who does do the kind of thing I'm describing? When you're 28 and you're applying for your second job out of college, your third job out of college, yeah, you're going to go ahead and email the recruiter and do all the things that I'm telling you about, because you're going to know that's obviously, you saw that happen when people were applying to your company. You're going to have learned that by then. So doing that early signals by expressing your passion fit with the company in a personal way, by connecting individually with somebody there, letting them know you applied, is a way for you to actually pattern match completely away from the typical freshman, typical young first timer who's just thinking, I'm going to put in my application, wait and see if I'm worthy. Now, a last note on this point before I get to the next slide. There are companies you may want to work for that don't have open job positions listed, or you're Googling around and you're clicking all over the website and there's nowhere that says that they're hiring interns. So you go, well, I guess I'm not going to apply. They're not hiring for interns. Or they do put an internship posting and they require some technology you don't know. You know Android development and it says, you know, we want iOS developers. You've done React Native and it says we want somebody, you know, doing Django. So then you say, okay, maybe I won't apply. Wrong. This is in particular advice, well, to everyone, because everyone does this, but in particular to the women in the audience, because in my experience and through a couple of studies that I've read, it is more common for women to self-disqualify from applying for a role when they don't see all the qualifications listed or when there isn't a role listed in the first place. So what I want you to visualize every single time you're about to disqualify yourself, you're like, oh, I'd love to work at this company, but there's no job listed. Or I love to work at this company, but the job listed, I don't have all the qualifications. I want you to imagine in your mind's eye a dude who is half as competent as you are and 5 times as confident. Half as competent, 5 times as confident. Who's going to be like, oh, this company doesn't have a job listed for an internship? Fuck it. I'm going to email them anyway. I deserve to work there. And the reason I want you to visualize this person is that that person is going to get the internship. That person is going to get the job with half of your competence. And the reason why is that you disqualified yourself, so you weren't even in the running. The company didn't even have the option to select you over them because this super confident person was like, fuck it, I'm going to go for this. And they went for it. And so you have very little to lose in your portfolio of job applications, in your reach category of most out there dream, like I'm going to shoot for the moon and see what happens. You need to always be applying to some companies that don't even have jobs listed, where you're emailing, heck, the CEO saying, hey, I would love to intern for your company this summer. Here's my background. And we'll talk a bit about how to present that in a second. But you need to be doing that. Or, hey, you don't have all the qualifications? Doesn't matter. Don't apologize for it. Just say confidently, I think I would make a great intern for your company. Here's my background. Let me know if you want to talk. And if you don't do it, somebody half as competent and twice as confident is, and they're going to get the gig. And you're going to run into these people in your professional life. You're going to be there making a lower salary, looking over at some job at the same company you didn't apply for because you thought you weren't qualified. And the person in that job is going to be dumber than you with less skills. And you're going to be like, wait a second, how is that possible? And the only difference is that they went for it and you didn't. So don't self-disqualify. You will fail. You will get turned down a lot. But it's for them to turn you down, not for you to turn yourself down. And I know so many people whose dream opportunity came because they made a personalized first step out to a company that was not hiring formally for a job, or they applied for a job where they didn't have the qualifications. And this advice is so hard to keep straight. One of my roommates runs workshops like these all the time. And she always gives this advice. She's like, when I was an early software engineer, I made this mistake all the time. And now I tell people not to do it. And then she wanted to go and get a job to do phone banking for a political campaign for the upcoming election. And they had some qualifications listed. And she was like, oh, I can't be a phone banker because the qualifications disqualify me. And I'm like, you literally give talks on this. And yet, right? So just keep this in mind, all right? Because it's just very, very hard to blast through that personal barrier. So with that said, we're going to look at some specific strategies to find jobs. So again, tech is everywhere. It doesn't matter what sector you're interested in. You could not even identify as somebody who's interested in tech first, and you could find that within the sector that you know and love, there are tech jobs. It's a matter of finding those lists. There are thousands, literally, of tech companies in every single sector that you can possibly imagine. So the first step is a resume. You're going to want to keep your resume to a one-pager. You're going to want to make sure that you put your aspirational title up top. So don't put student, put like software engineer, or the most true thing about you that isn't like a complete lie. So obviously don't put like, you know, machine learning engineer if you've never seen machine learning before. But if you've done front-end web development, you might put front-end web developer, software engineer, back-end web developer, full-stack web engineer, whatever is the most true thing about you there, even though you are a student. The second thing is you're going to put your projects and experience above your education, because that's what the pros do. The most exciting thing about you should not be that you are studying. In fact, if you're a freshman, you may want to remove your expected graduation date or something so people don't realize that you're a freshman. You want to lead with your projects and what you've accomplished. All right. And that is really the most important there. Now, the resume I want to de-emphasize because that's kind of on its way out, especially in an online world. You're not going to physical career fairs handing out resumes to people. So what really does matter is actually your portfolio. So if you go to makeschool.com/hire, you will see an example of what an ideal portfolio is like. So let's just take a very, very quick look at this. Let's go to somebody like, you know, Mariana. Mariana's portfolio, we help generate these for folks, but you can do this yourself. Basically, you want to be showing projects like these tiles here. So you'll want to put this on a personal website. What does this mean? This means a photo that's either of your code or representative of the project concept, a title and a quick description, and then a link to see the code. And if the project is live and interactive, a second link to try it out. So for example, for this one, Good Eats, view the project on like live, view a post that she wrote about it, view a GitHub repo. Now, look at this. You have no idea how complex these projects are. And reality is some of them are really freaking simple. What matters to some degree is volume. My specific recommendation is that for your portfolio, you're going to want to have 3 projects, of which 1 is substantial and 2 could be even weekend hackathon projects. But you want to have them there as tiles because you want to be presenting to an employer the pattern match that you are. It's not even a question, have you taken a CS class before or not? It doesn't matter. You know how to code, you know how to build. If you're applying for a designer position, same deal, right? It's not about your formal qualifications because you're not going to win on the formal qualifications. You're going to win on showing your portfolio. So that gives you a very actionable optimization for all of you in the audience. Whether you are junior, senior, freshman, it does not matter. By the time you are applying for internships, so by November of next year, at the earliest, if you're a senior, have at least 3 projects that you can show off on your portfolio, one of which is more than a weekend project, so that if you want to show someone something that they can go deeper in your GitHub profile and take a look, they're going to learn, oh, this person knows how to code, they know how to use version control and all of that. If you don't know what GitHub is, by the way, that is totally fine. There's plenty of time to learn. Again, you're at least a year away, if not more, from this. This is the single biggest difference between somebody who does all the outreach and gets no interviews and someone who does all the outreach and gets first interviews. It's that portfolio which tells someone, I code for fun. You're not going to judge me through the grades I got in my classes because I am more than that. You are going to judge me based on what I've built. And hackathons are great for that. Next up, the personal website. So there's a lot of ways to play this, including drag and drop builders these days that look great. You don't have to build something from scratch. You can do something purely like from one of these services, or it could be one of your projects. Hi, this is my personal website. I built it myself. Photo of yourself in a round frame, very, very in vogue these days. The title, designer and developer. Notice how Jess doesn't say, I am a student. And then tiles showing off portfolio projects. You can do it the way we showed in the Make School website. You can do it the way that speaks to you in design, but at least 3, if not more. And that's all you need on a personal website. Basically, what you're telling the world is, I am mature enough to know that a personal website and personal branding is important. I am mature enough to have done portfolio projects that I can show you. I'm going to show them to you here. The one thing I would do differently from Jess's is I would have a link under her name to her GitHub and her LinkedIn. So that's the one thing that I would do differently. Now, time check from the leadership. I was told I have until 45 after. Is that correct?
I think we're starting to run into our next workshop, so we could wrap up quickly.
Sure. I'll take just a couple more minutes. So the last thing that I want to point out to you is a GitHub. It's a place where you back up your code. It's the place where every project should be. It's totally free to use. It's very simple to use it in its most basic way, which is just a place to back up your code. We've had students literally whose laptops were run over by a truck, and they didn't miss a beat because the next day they could just re-download everything from GitHub. But the most important thing about GitHub is it makes on your home profile page visible every single day you've coded. Every single day that you coded and backed your code up to GitHub, you get a green square. And I know so many recruiters, this is their shorthand. They just look at your GitHub profile. Yeah, there's some projects that's cool. If it's green, you get an interview. That's that. So what I want you to take away from this is you should all create a GitHub if you haven't already today, and you can game this process. Every single day you could go into some project, change one line of code, push it to GitHub, you'll get a green square. And so even if all you do from now until a year from now is just code a little bit every day, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a little reminder in the morning, push one line of code. Don't fake it to so egregiously that someone looks at it and goes, wait a second, this person is faking their green squares. But if you code a little bit every day or 3 times a week or even just every weekend and you get green squares spread across your calendar, this is a game changer, literally a game changer. Just tell someone that you code for fun on a regular basis. So this is a huge one too. No time for questions. If you want to shoot me a note, Arnav, you guessed correctly, jeremy@makeschool.com. And if you're interested in learning more about this school, you can always just go to our website. So I'm going to summarize and then wrap up. You are going to bypass all the traditional systems by building a list of companies you want to apply to, making sure that you not only formally apply, but make personal contact with them. And if they don't have a way to formally apply, you're going to put yourself out there and reach out anyway. You're going to have reach companies, target companies, safety companies. You're going to have a personal website with your portfolio on it, which is going to be the thing you lead with when you email folks. Check out my personal website. You're going to have a GitHub with a lot of green squares, and you're going to use peer-to-peer communication, talking to people by their first names, about them, and being very casual to signal that you are not just a freshman looking for approval. And I guarantee you, you will be in the best position of practically any freshman in the country if you follow all this advice to get an internship. Not a single person that I know who has actually done every step of this presentation has not landed an internship. And most often the one that misses is the GitHub. If you can do GitHub every single day, you are golden. So that's that. Thank you so much for your time, and back to you all, TeenTechSF crew.